Hey guys, what's going on? Jeff here from Films at Home, and today I'm going to kickstart a new video series based on some feedback that I got from you all in the YouTube community section. So this series is going to be a series about reviews of movies that I'm just now watching for the first time. So this is not a reaction video. This is not you watching me watch a movie. This is strictly a critique. This is a review. And I'm going to do it in my style. This is not going to be Ebert and Roper. This is not going to be the New York Times reviews. This is going to be Jeff telling you what he thinks about this film, sort of my visceral reactions immediately after watching what will certainly be some classic movies for the first time. Now, I'm probably not going to do things like Star Wars or Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, or other things that have been done hundreds and hundreds of times. But I'm going to try to dive into, I've got a poster of 100 movies that you need to see. It's basically a movie bucket list. I'm going to start to go through some of those, and then I'll work on some other either lesser known movies or some things that are classics that are just from before my time that I'm just now watching for the first time at home. So today's video is going to be the latter. This is an 80s classic. This is a movie that I literally just watched for the first time yesterday, and I'm going to give you my review of it, my initial reactions, my first impressions, everything that came from this movie, and hopefully this will be an interesting series, a little bit of a different type of review from what I usually do with 4K and Blu-ray, but it hopefully will be something interesting that you guys all want to watch, and I'll continue with this if you like this one. So the movie we're talking about is Dirty Dancing, and I have here the 30th anniversary Blu-ray edition. That's how I watched the movie. Of course, most of these I'll be watching on physical media, so you'll at least see how I watched them. And it was kind of a strange movie for me. So Dirty Dancing, the background of this movie and what I knew about it going in. I knew it was an 80s classic. I knew it was a romance, sort of a romantic comedy of sorts. I knew it was massively hyped in the late 80s. I knew that it kind of transformed Patrick Swayze. Not that he wasn't already becoming a huge actor, but man, this movie really put him on the dorm room walls of every female college student out there, and probably a lot of male college students as well in the late 80s. And basically all I knew about it was, nobody puts baby in the corner, and the lift at the end of the movie and the dance scene. Other than that, I knew nothing about it. I didn't know who was in it. I only knew Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze. So from the start of the movie, I was really confused because they talk about, in the opening scene, Baby talks about, well, it was 1963, okay? So it was before the Beatles came to America. It was before Jack Kennedy was shot. Okay, so it's early 1963, summer of 63, before all that stuff happened. But for the rest of the movie, I never really felt a connection to the early 60s. I thought that the outfits were really strange. They definitely looked more like 80s outfits. There were a lot of people wearing the leotards and some of the classic like 80s clothes that you'd see in other movies. So I was so confused at the start when the movie was actually taking place, because although they're talking about early 60s and they made this point in the opening scene to establish the time frame, they really don't touch on it for the rest of the movie. And honestly, the entire movie, it could have taken place in 1987. It could have taken place in 2007. It could have taken place in 1963 or 1953. There was no real tie-in to the time in the period, so I didn't know why that was made so important. But if the movie was supposed to be set in 63, a lot of things were off to me. Haircuts, clothing, and then a lot of the music in the movie, although when the characters are, say, in a car listening to the radio or putting on a vinyl record, you do get the early 60s, late 50s music. A lot of the music was music from the 80s. So it just didn't make any sense to me why this movie was set in the 60s. Why not just set it in 87? Because a lot of the same themes would apply. Now, the major storylines here, obviously we've got the romance plot between Baby and Johnny, and then we've got the abortion plot line. That's kind of a different plot that drives some of the other plot points. And then we have sort of the whole resort that they're at, and the way that the affluent families react and connect with sort of the poorer dancers and some of the working class people on the resort. So there's three different kind of themes here. And honestly, if you think about all three of the themes, again, tying back to the time period, 1963 is not unique in the fact that abortions were still something that people didn't really talk about, that sometimes people would have to go and do crazy things to get done. Sometimes they could get complicated. Relationships and pregnancies, sex before marriage and all that stuff, that was still all, the 80s were just as conservative in many ways as the 60s. And so all of this, and then the wealthy and the working class and those dynamics there were as big in the 80s as they ever were with Reaganomics and Ronald Reagan. So I didn't really understand the 60s tie-in at all. And each of the plot points, each of the major points that drove the plot and drove the story easily could have been done in the 80s, and there would have been no issue with that. Now, the acting in the movie was pretty good, but, there wasn't a whole lot of, again, like a character building. You kind of immediately established, okay, Baby's a rich girl, her dad's a doctor. Okay, Johnny's you're not really sure at first. He's dancing, he's in some really nice clothes, and you find out he's middle, lower class, working class person who's having a tough time coming up in life. But the whole relationship is honestly really strange too, because Baby's supposed to be 17 in the movie. Johnny's supposed to be 24. In real life, Jennifer Grey, I think, was 24 and Swayze was 34. So there's this big age gap, and nobody really talks about that. And then the whole time, it feels like that entire resort, the whole point of going to that resort and bringing your family there was basically to pimp out your daughters and try to get them, married to some Yale doctor or some Harvard lawyer. It was a really weird that was accepted as normal and never really touched on, like, oh, well, that's what you do. Just really weird. It just kind of came out of nowhere. I was expecting this movie to be much more about dancing and sort of like, almost like Footloose, like forbidden dancing and dirty dancing and things like that, and how that kind of changes the culture. But it was just, it really felt strange. Now, Swayze and Jennifer Grey, they do a good job. Both of them are fine in the movie. There's nothing really honestly special about either of their performances, I didn't think. And at the end of the movie, I kind of was left seriously lacking. I knew of the one scene at the end, right? There's this 5 to 10 minutes where the whole hall turned into this big dance. There's all this talk of change, and I guess this is how the world's gonna go now, from the 60s into the late 60s, and wow, like, look at that theme. And there was all that, but I felt like an hour and a half of this movie was not worth watching except for the last 10 minutes. It felt like the whole movie, as far as what I'd known and what everybody talks about being so great, was literally just the last 10 minutes. And if you took that 10 minutes away, this is not a very good movie. I didn't really enjoy it. There wasn't a whole lot to be invested in. The plot lines and the time period and the setting was all very strange. Honestly, the whole thing, I kept commenting while I was watching it, but it looked like we were watching dancing classes taking place at Camp Crystal Lake. And the way that it was shot and some of the scenes and the way that they set things up, I was literally waiting for Jason Voorhees to like come out of the woods or come out of the water and kill one of these girls or one of these guys, because it was just so awkward in that way. It felt really cheesy, and that's why I was feeling like this is an 80s slasher movie that they turn into a romance. They took an 80s slasher set and cinematography and turn that into a romance about dance. So I think a lot of the hype that this movie continues to get, and like the fact that we're getting 30th anniversary editions, there were 25th anniversary editions. This movie's very well known. Nobody puts baby in a corner. A very well known line, maybe one of the most well known lines from any movie, was delivered in this movie really flat. And I was like, oh, that's it. She literally was actually just sitting in a corner, like nobody had pushed her into a corner or had actually cornered her. No, she was literally just sitting in a corner, and Patrick Swayze comes to save her. Like, that was kind of lame. I think a lot of this is driven by nostalgia. I think it's a movie that has a very iconic soundtrack, and obviously in the late 80s, this spawned sort of a cultural phenomenon. Patrick Swayze became a massive megastar out of this movie. Jennifer Grey obviously enjoyed a ton of popularity after this movie as well. People are watching this movie through a nostalgia lens. They're seeing it through, the way they wanted to in the 80s. And I've experienced that. There's movies I go back and watch from the mid to late 90s that I grew up on, and you watch them 20 years later and you're like, ooh, this movie's not that good, but everybody talks about it because we all loved it as kids and we all thought it was great as teenagers. I couldn't believe that this was actually on my list of the 100 movies you have to watch, like the 100 movie bucket list. It's on my poster. I need to scratch it off now because I've seen it, but I was shocked that it was on there because it didn't do much for me. It fell pretty flat. I've seen other 80s romantic comedy stuff from John Hughes that is much better. Like Pretty in Pink is a much better movie than Dirty Dancing. Like Breakfast Club is a much better movie than Dirty Dancing. 16 Candles is a much better movie than Dirty Dancing. There's all kinds of great stuff from the 80s that tackle similar themes that are so much better than this movie. So I'm still confused why it gets so much hype. So I could go on and on about, things that bugged me, the negatives. A lot of the lines that were delivered were really flat. You weren't too invested in the whole abortion timeline. It was kind of like, she got an abortion. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to show it. We're not going to show the complications. Doctor's going to come in and fix her in 2 seconds, and that's going to be over with. So although they try to tackle that subject, they kind of skate around it anyway. The whole wealthy and the working class, that whole relationship and that dynamic, that's been done a million times. So there wasn't much special about it. The best sequences from this movie are clearly the dance scenes. There's one at the beginning, which is very good, and then obviously the scene at the end, and the sort of like, I call it like the Rocky training montage that they sort of go through in the middle of the movie with Baby and Johnny as she tries to gear up to go perform at that hotel with him. That sort of, that was kind of like, there's some good moments there, some funny moments, but overall, it feels like this movie is an hour and 40 minutes long, and you really only need to watch the last 10 minutes to truly appreciate it and get the most out of it. Nothing else really connected with me. I would rate it like a 2 out of 5. I don't give zeros, so like it would be a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I'd give this like a 2 out of 5. I wouldn't watch it again. I even watched it with my wife, who loves these kind of movies, these romantic comedies, especially stuff from the 80s, the John Hughes stuff. And neither one of us could connect with it. I thought it was just going to be me. Oh, you're a man. You don't like Dirty Dancing. You think it's lame. We both were like, wow, what was the hype about that movie? We didn't get it. So that's my sort of initial first visceral reaction to Dirty Dancing. I'm sure this will generate a lot of comments. Like I said, just my opinions and my review here. I'd love for there to be discussion about it in the comments, and I'd love to participate in some of the things that you guys think about the movie. But I'd encourage you all to go to watch it again. And but I just don't think it's a very good movie. I think it's a very nostalgic movie for a lot of people, but it's not a very good movie. So thank you for watching this first time review here. I'll be doing more of these if you guys like it. So again, like the video, let me know in the comments if you liked this sort of just off the cuff movie commentary, movie review. It's not something I do a lot of, but I do love talking about movies, and I'd like to do more of this to mix in with, technical 4K and Blu-ray stuff. Movies themselves and collecting movies are my first passion. 4K, reviewing, Blu-rays, home theater, that's kind of passion number 2. So I'd like to start mixing the two of them a little bit more. So let me know if you liked it. Leave a like. Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because maybe this is your first time to my channel. You've never seen any other review videos because you're not interested in 4K or Blu-ray, but there could always be some stuff that you can learn or get enjoyment out of when I do videos like this. So I think it's a good way to expand my audience as well and get some more subscribers. So if you're new here, please consider hitting the subscribe button and turning your notifications on. You can also follow me on Instagram and check out ways you can support my channel down in the links through channel membership and donations and other things. But I never block any content behind a paywall, so we do this completely free. There's no Patreon, none of that stuff. So I appreciate any support I get, but it's certainly not needed. And I really appreciate anyone who does watch this video, since it was my first attempt at one of these, covering a fairly popular movie like Dirty Dancing. I'm hoping that generates some discussion and gets a lot of views. So I appreciate you all watching. Dirty Dancing 30th anniversary. I'll leave a link to this down in the description as well if you want to pick it up. Not a bad Blu-ray, but one to have for your collection for sure if you're a fan. But I just didn't get it. I don't know. I didn't get it. Maybe it's me. But anyway, appreciate you guys watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon.